Summit, to name a few. In today's episode, we discuss her blockchain learning series that she developed for CompTIA and how that came about. What was the thought process in spinning off a new company, and how did they determine to make her the first ever president? Also, blockchain and cryptocurrency breakout sessions, her role at Accenture and PwC, and much, much more. I'd like to welcome our next giant, Sonia Mundra.
I'm Sonia Mundra. I'm the president of Chenega Analytic Business Solutions. We are an Alaska Native corporation, which means that we're 100% tribally owned. We're owned by the Chenega tribe in Alaska. And Chenega's been in business since the 1970s. We've been doing business with the federal government since 1997. So CABS, as we call ourselves, Chenega Analytic, is an 8A certified ANC, and we offer professional services in IT, cyber, software engineering, systems engineering, training, intelligence, analysis, and administrative work. So we have a pretty wide breadth of things that we do, being an ANC, and that's my mission.
Now, you started off with Chenega Applied.
Correct.
Solution. Okay. And then you worked your way up there, and then they
Yes.
form analytic business. So can you tell us about that? How did that process go?
Yeah.
And then it looks like you were the first president or the only person.
Yes, of Chenega Analytic.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So I started out, I am unusual. Yes, you've picked up on that. I am unusual.
Yeah, you are very unusual. An accountant, IT, blockchain, AI. I mean, no, that's it's like your brain doesn't have any more room in it.
Well, I do learn from an incredible team of partners, and I learn from customers. So I do learn every day. I am learning every day from everybody. And you have to be open to that learning, right?
Okay.
You're never done learning. So I like to stay humble and know that I don't know it all, for sure. But yes, so I'm a CPA. And I started out at Chenega Applied as a company controller, which is a line staff position. I was very happy in that role. It was a great job. I was all about, I'm all about the numbers, and that's something that I've had to pivot a little bit too.
And that's a left brain trait.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a very, numbers. I've traditionally been a very numbers oriented person.
Right.
And so, it was a learning curve for me when I started working to understand that, it's great to track things using numbers, right? It's great to be a data-driven organization, for sure, because you need to know where you're at, right? In order to pivot. But no numbers can replace a relationship. Right. No numbers can replace communication with the customer. So you may be meeting all your SLAs with a customer, from a numerical perspective, but the customer, still needs that TLC sometimes. They still need, you got to reach out and touch them, and you got to make sure that relationship is good. Don't just rely on, well, my numbers look all good. My SLAs look good. Because frankly, it's a very tone deaf thing to do, because we are all people. Customers are people. And we're, people, it's such a cliche, and I say it all the time. People do business with people that they like and trust, period. So, but, I guess I got sidetracked, but, I started out.
I love it. No. By the way, since you're sidetracked, we're going to reroute. What is it? Let everyone know, what is an SLA?
Oh, service level agreement.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. You're right. GovCon has a lot of
GovCon has a lot of acronyms, and I like to bring people back because I don't know who's out here listening to this. So I just
true. No, that's smart. That's smart. Yeah, that's true. Because especially with DoD and with GovCon, we've got our own we've got our own jargon. So and it could be. I'll tell you, when I don't have a military background, and the majority, our DoD is our main customer. The majority of the folks are retired DoD. So when I first got to Chenega, I was like, who's Roger? Who's this guy Roger that they keep talking about? Like
Yeah,
it took me a while to
figure
understand
out.
some of their jargon too.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so you could
um,
proceed. So you started off and you worked your way through. Go ahead.
I did, yeah. So
You
the
started
company
that,
was growing,
right?
and so they I guess I'd like to think they needed a warm body, so they pushed me into operations, and I
Okay.
just naturally started doing it anyway, and I found that I enjoyed it, and of course I I was a learning curve for me. The company sponsored me, Chenega sponsored me to get my PMP, which was a great thing. I did not have any project management or operational background, but that finance and accounting background was very a great foundation, right, for moving into operations. I had to learn to become more customer oriented. I worked as a program manager as well for a lot of our customers, and then I was promoted to director of operations. So in that, I onboarded 45 prime contracts across the federal government, and I managed a team of 350 people, CONUS and OCONUS.
Right.
So we were pretty much on that 24-hour email cycle.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you, though, I couldn't have done it without the tip of the spear. And the tip of the spear is the on-site program managers, project managers, site leads, right? The
Yeah. Yeah.
technical experts.
Sure.
So absolutely. I mean, like I said, what is it saying? It takes a team to make the dream a reality kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No. That's true.
yeah.
That's true.
So, yep. So I did that for a couple of years, and then, Chenega Analytic was founded with me in mind. So our boss, the head of the strategic business unit for Chenega, for government contracting, he appointed me to become general manager and president of this new spinoff, right?
Okay.
That was meant to be the small business or the 8A arm of Chenega. And that was
Okay.
back in 2017. And so we ran as a small disadvantaged business for 2 years, actually, prior to getting our 8A certification. We just completed year 1 of the 8A program. And
Nice.
so, so my job is, all the customer relationships, business development, and then managing the operations and the employees. Yep.
Now, how was that different from coming into the organization that was already established?
Mm-hmm. Well, I got to be queen for the day or for a couple of years, right? So it's interesting because, especially when you're the deputy, right? I mean, you learn, but at the end of the day, you're the deputy, right?
Yeah.
So your job is to carry out the actions of the person in charge. And most of the time I did agree with the actions that were being taken, but there were times when I went through for several years and kind of was like, I might have done that differently, or this was a lesson learned. And a lot of it wasn't necessarily disagreeing, but just thinking, maybe I could have done that differently, or if I had to do this again, I would have done X, Y, or Z. So I kind of got that opportunity, with this new company, because I get to be in charge, and
Right.
that's a good thing and a bad. It's a
I was gonna
double-edged
say,
sword,
yeah.
right?
Yes, very much
So
so. Very
yeah,
much so.
and I have tons of lessons learned on this company too. But it's kind of like my quote unquote second company, right? Within the Chenega construct.
Right.
So yeah, it's been interesting, but we're a young company still, and we're very early in the 8A program. So I'm excited to see what the future brings.
Wow, nice, nice. You said you have some lessons learned. Can you share with us something in particular? I know that
Sure.
you're open to sharing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So we are 8A, right? And so one of the things that I would do would be I would respond to RFIs, or I would spend a lot of, quote unquote, sweat equity, right? Just marketing to customers, federal government customers, without really understanding, and it sounds so silly, but without really understanding how they buy things. So I would understand that this is what they buy, right? You've got
Right.
to understand what they buy,
Sure.
which is, okay, you buy software engineering, you buy IT, you buy the
Sure.
things that we sell.
So,
But I didn't do a good job understanding how they buy, right? And I think I've definitely noticed, I've been with Chenega for over 6 years, and category management is something that is huge, and it's not going away. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think back in the day, we were 8A, and it was just, we're 8A. and that's it. We
Right,
don't have a
right, right,
need for
right.
other vehicles. But category management is huge. I mean, you see it with tons of agencies like Department of Commerce.
Sure.
You see it with DHS has gone huge. DISA. I mean, so you can market and you can spend time and you can brief folks, but if you don't have the vehicle that they want, it doesn't really matter, right? So just getting a better understanding before I go and spend travel dollars and things like that, just marketing to these customers, just it's fine to do that, but just understand how they buy, right?
Okay.
Beforehand.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, can we talk about category management? Do you have, or is that not something that you're versed on?
Yeah, let's talk about category
No, I
management.
mean, because
Sure.
I really, I see it laid out, but I don't really understand it, right? How does it
Yeah.
apply? Like, you see it and you see, okay, all right, we know best in class, we see it.
Right.
But what does that mean to people?
So
In fact, while we're talking, I'm going to pull up my chart so I can sound articulate.
and please I'm not a government servant, right?
Right.
So who could explain it? I mean, no one could explain it better than a government servant who's a procurement expert. But I will tell you
But
how
from the
I
standpoint
understand.
of a small business and right, how do we use it to our advantage or disadvantage, or what can we do with it?
Right. So category management is something that, the best of my understanding, was something that was really pushed by President Obama, right? And believe it or not, it actually has also been pushed by President Trump. I think that's probably the only policy that they've had in common.
We're not going to say that publicly.
I think it's safe to say that's probably the only thing that they have probably agreed on in terms of policy, right? In the president's management agenda, the PMA, when you read that, right? When you read what the presidents are writing, category management is something that they both agree on. So needless to say.
That's awesome. This is gonna be on YouTube today.
Oh gosh.
Go ahead.
So I mean, that is something that they definitely both agree on. So and I understand why category management is important. So of course there's a mandate from the president that the government acquisition folks need to think of ways and come up with ways to be more efficient in when they're procuring things and less wasteful, et cetera, right? Which is excellent, right? Nobody wants waste. As taxpayers, we don't want waste. But so what that has translated into is that they want to procure using what you refer to as best-in-class vehicles. So I will just use GSA as an example, right? And now we've traditionally had, the Schedule 70, the 36, the this, the that, and the other. Yep. And so they've had that stuff. And now, of course, they're going to a consolidated schedule, right? So the point is that by going through that schedule, let's just use Schedule 70. By going through Schedule 70, you've got vendors that are pre-approved, pre-vetted. Right. Rates have already been agreed upon, right? Mm-hmm. So that sounds a lot more efficient potentially than going through, in other methods. Right. Let's say like a full and open where you've got all these different rates. You've got, it takes 18 months to evaluate. Right. So I would assume it's to speed up the acquisition process. Okay. So just understanding that, okay, this is how the agency wants to buy. These are their preferred strategic sourcing vehicles, and understanding that, you've got to get a seat at the table on these strategic sourcing vehicles of their choice. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter what your capabilities are, and you've got to have a lot of different vehicles because there's so much variety. You've got to have a couple at your disposal. And it may not be you. It may be, let's say, it may be through a partner, right? Right. Through, yeah. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to get onto these GSA schedules or you've got to do X, Y, and Z. And we're in a little bit of a unique position too, because the 8A Alaskan Native procurement is known as alpha contracting. And so that is, I personally believe that is an extremely efficient method. I don't know if anything can get more efficient, because you have the ability, once SBA provides its blessing, right? Yeah. You have the ability, that's a very important caveat, right?
That is a very important caveat.
Very important caveat.
People out there, the contract that I was talking about that I got the phone call in this morning, before they even sent me any information, they had to go through the SBA to provide their blessing
Always.
before we could even talk.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, and sometimes I have to remind customers, because they want to get ahead of the game. And I'm like, look, love you, want to do it all, need SBA's blessing to move forward. Yeah. So, with us, when you do the alpha contracting, I mean, you have the ability to engage directly with the customer, to talk very freely and openly about budgets. Because for me, I'm like, okay, if your budget is $2 million, what's the most that I can squeeze in for you under the budget that you have? Whereas if you're in a closed competition, right, where you can't talk, you don't know the pain points of the program office, you don't know what traditionally has been an issue for the contracting office, and you don't know what the budget is. So if I don't know what the budget is, it would be potentially maybe hard for me to bid, right? And I might overbid or underbid, and then that doesn't always lead to a great result in execution, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that it's definitely important to understand what category management is. And look, we can't be on every vehicle that the government uses. We just can't. But, think about, okay, well, let's say I do business with the Navy, right? Then you need to think about getting on to next gen, Seaport Next Gen. You need to think about, okay, well, what are the best in class vehicles? And for us, it would be, of course, in addition to the 8A, so that offers customers options, when they're procuring.
I'm going to go back to that chart just so we can reference it.
Sure.
For example, she mentioned on here, IT Schedule 70. It's here under the IT categories. You have NASA SOUP. That falls, right? So that's another best-in-class designation.
Correct.
All right. VETS 2, Alliance Small Business. All right. For professional services, you have Oasis Small Business. Okay. So I just want to share that with people out there. Great. No, that's good stuff. I love it because, again, you hear these things tossed around and no one really knows what they are, what they mean, and particularly small businesses, it's difficult when you're learning and getting started.
Well, yeah. And the only thing that I would, if I could reach out and provide and dare to provide feedback to our government customers, right? The only thing I would say is that a lot of customers will ask small businesses, are you on IT 70 or are you on this class and are you on that, are you on that? And sometimes when you say no, they take it like, I feel like almost, and maybe I'm projecting, but I feel like they take it like, oh, what, you don't want to compete or you just want to be 8A kind of thing. But you guys got to understand, if I were to reach out and speak directly with a customer, we have to have a certain level of past performance to even get onto these vehicles.
Right.
So, and I understand now personal past performance is being used and other things are being used, but I sometimes have to gently remind customers that, we don't qualify to on-ramp onto X, Y, and Z schedule because we have to have a year of past performance, right? And OPS, it's not cheap for a small business to get onto any vehicle, even the 8A certification. I mean, that everything costs money. So, so that's the only thing I would say would be for customers to just consider that.
Another challenge that from my understanding and speaking with people on this show is you also have to maintain a certain level of contracts within that schedule to continue on the schedule. So again, if I don't have any contracts, then I spend all this time and effort to get on the schedule. And then, because I've seen even people come to me and says, hey, look, we are being not threatened, but they are looking at canceling our schedule as a result of not meeting the minimum qualifications.
Yep.
So there's a lot of variables that go into not only just getting on a schedule, but maintaining that schedule.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And that's another thing. If we were to have any government folks that are listening, it's expensive. You have to have a certain level of past performance. Like you've got to have a year's worth of past performance, right? So your company could be a couple years old before you even qualify to on-ramp onto a schedule. And those on-ramps, I mean, for GSA, I mean, it's a continuous on-ramp, but for others, I mean, it's a one-time on-ramp. So if you're not ready, you're just not ready. And you can't, you kind of quote unquote miss the boat, right? So which is unfortunate. But yes, it is true that with GSA at least, or how it used to be, and I believe it's still like that, you do get in the penalty box if you don't um, win or bid, I guess, a certain amount of
Right.
work on the schedule. And frankly, to be honest, when you look at it, GSA expects you to do the marketing,
Yes.
to
Yes. Right.
market,
Right.
your own stuff, and push it toward that schedule. So marketing, having a person who's monitoring eBuy all day, and then responding to these rapid task orders, that's at least one FTE that you've got to
Yeah.
keep full-time
Right.
on staff, as a small business, with no guarantee of
Right.
results.
So, no.
So
Right. No, it's
yay.
a lot of no, it's a huge effort. It's a huge effort on the part of a small business. Question: have you looked at, or is your company looked at CSOs or OTAs?
No.
Is that not go fit in the line of your business?
I know Chenega in general, some of those companies that have graduated from the A-Day program, because we've got different companies. They have had a lot of success, I believe, with OTAs. So yeah.
Because that area is growing. I mean, that area is growing like
yes.
through the roof.
It is. OTAs is definitely something, and I think part of the quote unquote laziness on my part is the fact that we have an 8A. So the OTA may or may not be, it's hard to top, it's hard to top an 8A when you're an ANC, right? It's hard to top that vehicle, honestly.
That's the what do you call it? Alpha contracting?
Alpha contracting.
I've never even heard of that before.
Yeah. I guess we have a high opinion of ourselves sometimes, calling it that. I didn't make that up. It's called alpha contract.
No. Well, I can tell you this from my own personal experience. I love ANCs. I've always recommended my students and listeners to work with ANCs. I found them to be extremely fair with contractors, very responsible contractors, more so than a traditional large firm or large business. Okay, ANCs, they have, and you can. I've seen you've written it, right? You guys have like the agility of a small business, but you have the bandwidth of a large business.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be tremendously helpful in my success and my journey in federal contracting, even from the construction standpoint. I work with Bristol Bay Native Corporation. Okay, and then particularly I work with some of their divisions, ANCs, and I work with them. Different sister ANCs, right? So I work, like, for example, let's say you're Chenega Applied, then you work with Chenega Analytic. I've worked with two different ones, or actually I've worked with
we encourage that.
Yeah?
Yeah, we encourage that because we don't cannibalize each other's work, right? I mean, that would be foolish. So, I'm the brand new 8A spinoff, and then my sister company might, be the full and open. So yeah, we constantly share teaming partners, and if something is not appropriate, then I throw it to. I constantly am throwing work over at sister companies where we can't get it, because for us, it's it's all about the big C. Right, it's all about Chenega. Yeah.
Okay. No, and so how would a small business that saw, okay, we could do some capabilities, how do they reach out to you? How does that happen? Like, what does that process look like?
I'm an open networker, so if they were to reach out on LinkedIn, that's one way. That's a great way to do it. I mean, my phone numbers everywhere. My email. Everywhere. I mean, it's not, my stuff is not, my contact information is not a secret. People are like, how can you keep your cell phone number on all over the place? And and they're like, do you get junk calls and spam calls? I'm like, no, actually, I mean, I don't, other than, the IRS or whatever, like, which everybody gets. But no, I mean, I work in business development. So, you need to know how to get in touch with me. And it needs to be easy. So there's, our website, there's, everything should be open and transparent. But yeah, I love to team. I'm an open networker. So if people call me, as long as they're, professional, obviously, and they want to do a capabilities exchange or something like that, then yeah, I do try to make that happen. as you know, at least within a couple of weeks. It may not be that particular week, but you know, and so how to get in touch. I mean, it's always helpful too if you have a specific opportunity that you want to talk about and a specific value proposition. So I've had companies, the vast majority of companies that contact me are extremely professional. Some have not been very professional because, you know, like I'll take a call and I'll be like, okay, well, what would you like to talk about? Why did you ask for this call, kind of thing? Mm-hmm. And I had one guy that was like, I really need to get past performance. I was like, yeah, me too, man. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Like, I'm like 2 years in. I'm
like, yeah, you and me both.
Right.
But it's helpful if you can, when you're, I mean, this applies to everybody, you know, tell people why they should work with you.
Sure.
And the other thing that's been kind of, quote unquote, grating on my nerves lately is that I probably get 7 to 8 calls, texts, emails a day. What are you working on that we can help you with? What are you working on that we can help you with? And I'm like,
and do their research.
And I'm like, there's gotta be, you have to understand that as a prime, when I'm interfacing, I'm the one who's interfacing with the customer. And majority of the time being an ANC, I'm going to be the prime, right? So and all the risk is on me, right? As a prime. So I have to be able to justify to a customer why they have to pay extra money for me to bring on a subcontractor, right? Because it costs extra. Subs cost extra. And I have to be able to look that customer in the eye and give a good reason for why that subcontractor is there, how they build a stronger team, right? When I can frankly just capture everything myself, right? And I can self-perform, and that's cheaper for the customer. It's operationally easier for me, right? So for us to bring on a sub, right, there needs to be a reason. And that, by the way, that applies to me too. So when I'm interfacing with large companies, there has to be something that I'm bringing to the table in terms of a P-win, why they should engage me as a sub when they're bidding something that's full and open as a prime, right?
You said in terms of a P-win.
Yeah, in terms of, so when, okay, I see what you're doing.
I'm just asking.
Yeah.
You know, like.
So a P-win is a probability of win, right?
Okay,
so,
there you go.
So every time we go after something, we have to assess the risk and reward and say, okay, we're going to put resources, time, money, energy, sweat equity, et cetera, into this bid. What is the P-win? Right? And a lot of tools have P-win calculators and things like that. Do we have the size, scope, complexity of past performance? How much capture have we done with the customer? You know, are we an incumbent, et cetera? So for me, I mean, yes, large businesses have a small business subcontracting plan. But to be dead honest with you, I would never be so amateur to go up to a large business and say, well, you really need to put us on because we're a small business. Yeah, me and everybody else,
yeah,
right?
99% of us are small businesses.
Right. So you really need to put us on. You got to do, people have got to do better than that. Small business folks have got to do better than that. And I include myself in that category because we are a small business, right? Despite the fact that we're ANC, Chenega Analytic is absolutely a small business. So, now, if you're bidding something with a certain customer and I have past performance, I have intel, I have insights, I have this, that, and the other, then that's a value proposition that I can bring to the customer. And then it makes sense for the customer to put us on because it's increasing the overall P-win if I'm filling a gap that they don't have. Right. So please, PSA, please stop texting me and asking me. Asking me to put you guys on, please. I'm tired. Okay.
No, and that's good. That's great information. I mean, now you mentioned some tools that you use. What kind of tools that you guys are using in your company, or in the previous company when you were working before you were a small business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we use Deltek, Gutwin, right?
Right.
We use that to manage our pipeline. Some people use Salesforce, and I know GovTribe is out there. I know Deltek's a little bit on the pricey side.
Right. I was gonna say, yeah.
Yeah, I
Get it
know.
started. Deltec is not for
Oh,
little
yeah.
guys.
So that is something that we use. But something else that's out there now that we are starting to figure out how to use it, is BetaSam. BetaSam is excellent for tracking, things that are out there, industry, upcoming small business events, virtual small business events, industry days that are mostly being held virtually now, acquisition forecasts, LRAFs as we call them, long range acquisition forecasts. They give sometimes points of contact if you're a small business, who to reach out to, the OSDBU lead. And then if you respond to, obviously all the solicitations are out on there, but sources sought notices are on there too. So, and BetaSam's free. It's free to everybody. And I've learned to log in, and now I've learned that it's got a function that you can follow opportunities, because either it wasn't there before,
No,
or we
it
couldn't
didn't
figure out how to
exist.
use it.
No, it didn't
Right,
exist in the
exactly.
beginning.
That was very awful.
I get that's if there's a message that I receive often is about BetaSam, like about
I
people like
know.
cringe, like, oh, I don't know. It's
Well, thank
it's
goodness now. I
improving,
think,
and I've always
yeah,
told people, look, change. No one likes change, right? It doesn't matter what age we are. We don't like change, but
true.
at some point, BetaSam will become more robust, and it'll be better than FBO in the long term. It just has to get there.
Yeah, and so one thing that's been helpful that irked me in the beginning was that you couldn't follow opportunities, right? I couldn't flag and follow opportunities and get push notifications. And I do know that they have that now. You do have to create a login,
right,
and log in, but I think you had to do that with FBO too. So.
Yeah, you did do it with FBO.
Yeah. So they do have that. So it's so that is a free tool. That's the best tool. I know some of the other tools are expensive, but and then with some of the Deltek CRM packages, they do have PWin calculators that you can use if it's a competitive opportunity, and it's still subjective. PWin calculators are always subjective. It's the data that it spits out is only as good as the data that you put in.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that you can use in a competitive environment.
Something that we have not touched on yet. You've spoken a lot on blockchain, AI, innovation, and government. And in fact, also, you did a learning series on blockchain with CompTIA.
Wow, you've done a lot of Googling. Yes, I have.
I know. I want to understand the people that I'm going to be speaking with. I mean, I want to get the most out of the conversation. Look, I'm not, how do I say this? I'm very versed in government contracting, right?
Uh-huh.
So for me, again, like I said, I've worked with ANCs. I don't need people to explain ANC to me, right? I've done business with them. In fact, my largest contract ever as a small business was given to me by an ANC. I'm very
That's
thankful for
great.
that. But going back to what your point was, they actually reached out to me as opposed to me reaching out to them, because I was working on another project and they could not fulfill the requirement for the government client. And they were struggling, and the companies that they had been working with had no idea of how to help them meet this requirement. And it was in terms of, and I'll just talk about it, because when people hear that, they think maybe it's like a race thing or minorities. No. It was a technical requirement for a specific type of building product that the government was asking, and none of their subcontractors could meet that technical requirement to get access to these very specific type of materials that the government wanted to use in this construction project. And so they reached out to me to come out and look at it and see if I could help them. Because I was building a building for them on another site, if I could help find someone that could build this building using this very specific type of materials. There was only 2 companies in the country that did it. And so I brought them on, but they didn't understand government fulfillment. So they said, listen, we want you to stay on so you can help this company be able to do business with us, because we can't work with someone and have to teach them how to do government contracting.
Yeah, it's a lot to ask.
It was a big ask. And on something, I mean, this was a $20 million project. Our scope was just around $5 million. And they said, Eric, we can't afford that, right? We're not set up to do that, to train people how to do government contracting.
It's a lot to ask, because And I've had, it's funny because I just talked about that too, is that, I initially tried to coach folks that wanted to get in, that were very heavy in the commercial and wanted
Right.
to get into government contracting, but the not understanding the clearance process, not understanding, the type of folks that having to hire cleared folks, and then having, frankly, very, what we call commercial rates, right? Trying to get those into the government. I mean, the government has very different rate structure. I mean,
Right.
so the margins in general are lower in government contracting than they are in commercial, I would say, right? Wouldn't you say that?
Yep, I would agree.
But the projects are typically longer.
Right.
So that makes sense if you've got that backlog coming. But yeah, sometimes you get involved with these commercial folks and their rates are out of this world.
Well, what I've also seen is the administrative burden.
Oh,
They don't expect that. And that's a
It's
huge hurdle for a lot
it's a
of
lot. People, I have partners that just won't do business with the government.
Right.
It's a lot. And with the CMMC stuff, I mean, it's a good thing. It's a great thing. But yeah, I mean, just like we talked about with the GSA schedules and maintaining stuff and going through SBA to get your 8A, none of the stuff is cheap. I mean, fortunately, we've got SBA has free consultants and website information. You can call people, and we have PTACs who are free, thank God. So there are resources that are out there, but yeah, you have to be prepared for an administrative burden when you start to do business with the federal government.
Right. And that's what I found. So, so let's talk about blockchain. I mean, I don't know anything about blockchain. I mean, I've heard the word thrown around. I'm not going to go through your series because it's here. We're going to make it available on the show notes page. We'll make a link to the CompTIA series that you did, Introduction to Blockchain. But I would like to know, in the speech that you gave at the Venture Capital Conference, where you talked about technology, innovation, and government, some highlights of that talk.
Sure. So what blockchain is, to kind of start at the beginning, is it's essentially a distributed ledger, right? So it can be used in a variety of use cases. It's heavy in the commercial world right now, and particularly OCONUS, right, in certain hotspots like Estonia and Dubai and other places. The federal government, HHS, recently ran the first successful proof of concept, right, for blockchain. And it was for the acquisition use case. So there's a lot of different use cases. For example, there's acquisition, looking for efficiencies in acquisition, supply chain management. So I'll give an example that I think people could understand. So let's say you've got, you go to the grocery store and you buy fair trade coffee, right? So how do you actually know that it's fair trade or fair trade chocolate, right? So you want to make sure that there's no human trafficking going on in the production and the distribution through that entire supply chain of that particular product. And you're willing to, it's important to you because you're looking for it on the label, and you're willing to pay a premium in many cases to ensure that you're consuming something that has a clean supply chain, right? Because we all know about, or at least a lot of us know about, some of the human trafficking or the child labor practices and things like that are happening, especially in foreign countries, right? Where we don't necessarily have command and control over everything that's going on. So we don't have command and control, but we have to vote, quote unquote, with our dollars, right? Right. So what blockchain does is it creates what is known as a clean ledger. And it's a good way of just keeping track of a supply chain to ensure fidelity, right? To ensure that your free trade coffee that's labeled that way, your fair trade coffee or your fair trade chocolate, is actually that, right? So it's basically creates what's known as a trustless system, where you don't have to rely on individual certifications. You can rely upon the blockchain to verify the supply chain.
Okay. And how does it do that?
So
no, because so I'll tell you one example that comes to mind when you mentioned the chocolate was I've read, and it's been a while, I don't know, 18 months ago or 2 years ago, but I read that they have a problem with that with organic products. How do you know if it's actually organic?
True.
Right. So we go to the store, it says organic, but then where's my ledger to show that it actually is organic?
Right. So what happens is that, basically things are being put onto, so you're talking about putting a product, right, onto a blockchain. So what it consists of is that there have to be, rather than having a single point of failure or a person that has to kind of check mark whether this is accurate or not.
Right.
And I'm just trying to keep it really high level and really simple
sure.
when I'm explaining it, because I don't want to get too much into it, but just for the layperson to understand blockchain from a non-technology perspective, right? So you've got to have, instead of having one single point of failure or one verifier, you've got many verifiers, right? You've got many verifiers, and those many verifiers all have to provide what's known as consensus, right? I'm sure you've heard of that company, Consensus. So that's why it's called consensus, right? It's a play on words because they have to provide consensus. Yeah. So that's why it's called consensus, and it's spelled with a Y. But they have to provide consensus, right? And they have to be users that are don't know each other and more than likely are not going to be in collusion, right? So the more users that you have, and the more people that are verifying and providing consensus, right? The less likely chance you have of collusion, and the more likely that this is going to be a clean product. So that's provided every step of the way when something is put on and that's why it's called a distributed ledger rather than a centralized point of failure, right?
Right.
So that happens every step of the way because think about it. You're running something through, some supply chain. You're shipping something. It's coming from the Far East. It's going through Panama. There's a guy in a Panama hat who's, checking the. I mean, come on.
I like that.
You know what I mean? Like
Panama hat with the flag in the background.
Yeah, with the flag, and I mean, how much do we trust the guy? Probably a lot. Yeah. How much do we trust the guy if somebody gives him a lot of money to make a check box? Maybe not so much. The point is that we don't, and it's not so much that we don't trust. The point of the blockchain is that we don't have to trust. We don't have to trust. I don't have to trust that somebody's check mark isn't cooked. Right. That's the thing, because it's a nuance, and it's funny because we talked about a lot of this when we were developing the course for CompTIA. A lot of folks said that, it creates trust. And I would actually argue that the blockchain doesn't create trust. What it does is it creates a lack of need for trust, if that makes sense, right? So right now we don't trust. Yeah, okay. Right now we don't trust.
Oh, I'm on it, just in case you didn't know.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, so right, exactly. So see how they talk about trusting currencies there, like blockchain, and so I would argue that rather than saying, okay, it doesn't create the blockchain. Some people say the blockchain creates trust. I don't believe that it creates trust. What it does create is it negates the need for trusting. I don't have to trust the guy in the Panama hat. Right. It doesn't matter whether he's cooked or not. It does not matter to me anymore. So that's being used for that, for tracking. And I'll tell you another way that's being used. It's being used in supply chain, right? Which is important, right? So if you think about the USDA and other folks, it's also being used for KYC, know your customer. So money, right? Where does it come from? It's going through a supply chain. It's being used to, because that's how people launder money. They put it into that's the definition of laundering money. They put it into legitimate businesses, right? So if you see Breaking Bad, the guy ran a laundromat, right?
Right. No, that's true. No,
so,
that's
right.
True.
You know what I mean?
I know. That's a very good point. Okay.
Yeah. So the question, and so then you're taking that money. Let's say you take that money and you start a government contract business from your laundromat. So let's put that money on a blockchain. We got a KYC, right? And so sometimes customers want their identities hidden, or people want their buyers want their identities hidden. And some of those reasons for hiding an identity can be legitimate, right? So let's say you're trying to sell me a house. Let's say, it's you and me, and I'm just, average Sonia, right? And so you're selling me a house. What if I was Jennifer Lopez? Would you try to sell me? Would you try to charge me a little bit more for that house? Yeah, you would, right?
Like,
of course, anybody would, right?
Like, 100,000 won't kill her.
Right, exactly,
Yeah,
right? I know. I wish I had her problems, but but like, I can understand why somebody like Jennifer Lopez is going to go through, or somebody who's rich, or somebody who's famous, or something like that. They're going to go through, an agent, right? That's typical. They're going to go through an agent, and the agent is going to act on behalf of Jennifer, J-Lo, right? To buy the house from you. And so, she doesn't want to disclose for privacy reasons, for just whatever. She doesn't want her name in the paparazzi and saying, hey, she bought, this house, et cetera, et cetera. She doesn't want people knowing her identity or her address, right? Because they're stalkers and things like that. So understand that there's very, very legitimate reasons for buyers not to disclose their identities, and that's okay. But we've got to, at the same time, we've got to KYC. We've got to know our customer, and we are responsible for doing that, by the way, as a government contractor. So if I'm working with you as a vendor, and you're working with another vendor, and that guy's working with another vendor and a vendor, I've got to make sure my entire supply chain is clean, and you guys aren't doing business with Iran, Cuba. You've got all the reps and certs, and you're following that. And that's also known as FCPA, right? Those rules, right? That are especially those Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. That's what FCPA stands for. So we've got to ensure and that's why I say, as a prime, the risk is always on me, because we've got to ensure that supply chain is fully clean when we're priming and we're selling something to the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now, how does that apply to innovation in the government side? So like give me so we know that you have the ledger, right? So what do you do differently than you did before?
Well, so for example, in a supply chain,
or not even yourself, what does the government do differently than they did before?
Right. So the government is looking at these use cases in a couple of different ways. So supply chain, I would say, for the USDA is definitely looking at it for food production.
Is there some way I can go and research these use cases?
Yeah, so there's a use case, the most successful and fully proved use case, the proof of concept, was done by HHS. It was done by HHS for acquisition, for the acquisition use case.
Okay. All right, I'll look it up.
Yeah. So how the government is starting to run small proof of concepts that we know of, right? Because there's some IC agencies that have been doing plenty of things that we don't need to know about. But KYC is one. Like, for example, with the SEC, KYC is a big one. The USDA, the supply chain, and even more importantly, frankly, or equally as important, we've got the Navy, right? Let's say the Navy is making training products, right? Or the Army is making training products for the soldiers and for the war fighters, and they're putting, let's say they're doing ground vehicles, right? For the war fighter. The sensors and the computers that go into that probably shouldn't be made in China. So how do we that's just me, right? So that's how we verify the cleanliness, quote unquote, of your supply chain, by actually putting that stuff onto a blockchain, onto an electronic blockchain, and then having people, right, distributed people, provide authority and verification that we've actually got a supply chain versus a guy in a Panama hat.
I like the guy in a Panama hat. I feel like he's going to appear on our screen at some point.
I wish, yeah.
Don't worry, this gets edited afterwards. We're going to see.
Okay.
When you see this, you're like, there's a guy in a Panama hat. You should just wave to him now.
Yeah, maybe that's how we should put it out on social media. The guy with the
Panama hat. I like that. I like that. That's awesome. All right. Now, so that's for blockchain. Now, you also spoke about cryptocurrency.
Yeah. So cryptocurrency, of course, the most famous.
By the way, I don't want to put you into a box. I mean, you tell me about new technology that's coming into the government space.
Yeah.
I just was referencing some things that I saw that you talked about.
Sure,
That
yeah.
versed in.
When people talk about crypto, they talk about cryptocurrency, which is the most famous cryptocurrency, of course, is Bitcoin, right? And so in the CompTIA learning series, which is free, right? So I strongly recommend everybody try it. And check it out because
Is this the same
it's
one that I have here on the
yeah,
screen?
that one.
Okay,
Yeah,
let me
it's free.
pull it back up.
And what I like about it is that we've got two hosts, right? So there's me and there's Sharish, and so Sharish is the technical
That's
person
Sharice?
in the series. Yep, that's Sharish.
Okay.
And I'm the quote unquote business or executive person who gives kind of a lay person foundation, right? And he gives an extremely technical foundation. And so this course is meant to be kind of like those old choose your adventure series, choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
So if you're an executive, it says in the beginning of the course, these are the series you should, have, let's say 1, 4, and 6, you should look at that, right?
Okay.
And whereas if you're a cybersecurity technology person, this is how you should take, 2, 7, and 8. Those should be your, and I think, it says that I think at the end of the very first introduction, it tells you that what courses you should take depending on who you are. So you will start, and you can do them all, but let's say you're pressed for time or you want to do something of your interest. If you're an executive, you go on that executive track, right? Because those folks just need to understand enough to be scary. They're not necessarily have to be a technical expert on it. Okay. And I give a lot of that foundation because I'm a company executive and I'm used to speaking with executives. Whereas Sharish talks more to the IT, the cyber, and the actual blockchain implementer, or to like a CTO or something like that. That's his track, if you will. So people can choose their own adventure depending on who they are.
How did you get involved with this and doing this for CompTIA?
I met up with the folks when I was at RSA a couple years ago, and so ended up talking with James Sanger, who's the chief technology evangelist for CompTIA, and we just got to know each other. He started a blockchain, shall we say, a working group, right, of a lot of people from Dell, RSA, it was Red Hat. I mean, it was honestly a huge honor for me because to be considered and to be part of a native organization, I always find that really prideful when we're being included on committees as subject matter experts next to executives from Dell and RSA and Red Hat, now IBM, right? Right. So they started a working group, and they, James picked 2 people out of the working group, which was me and Sharish, and he wanted, kind of that finance and that executive type of flavor, and he also wanted the full-on geek, right, flavor, which Sharish is. I mean, you talk about a big brain. Sharish has a huge brain. So he wanted both, and also a lot of it was about the chemistry because you've got to have good chemistry down there. So we ended up doing the video series. They flew me down to Gainesville, Florida, to the ITTV Pro.
Gainesville, Florida.
Yeah.
That's where the university is for. That's where I went to college.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. They have an ITTV Pro down there. And so I was down in Gainesville. We were all down in Gainesville, Florida for several days. And we did it. We did it over a couple of days. And it was my first time with a makeup artist who made me up, and it was funny because she put these false eyelashes on me, and I was like, I literally cannot see the teleprompter. Like, I can't see right now the teleprompter to be able to read my lines, and I was like I just wasn't, because you don't know, but if you're not used to them, apparently, they're pretty tough. So I have a new admiration for the ladies that wear the falsies now, but it's not something I could do on a daily basis. But
you took them off?
So
Took them off? They took them off?
I peeled them off, yeah. As soon as we got done filming, I peeled them right off because they were torturous for me. But yeah, no, we did that for several days, and then they cut and edited it in ITTV Pro, and then they when it was ready, they blew it up. So put it
Now
out.
you keep saying ITTV Pro. What is ITTV?
ITTV Pro is the production company that's down there in Gainesville, Florida, and they do all of they do a lot of they work with CompTIA, they work with ISACA, they work with PMI, so they work with all these organizations to kind of I think they're kind of the production company of choice for all these video trainings.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
I didn't know that. Never heard it before.
Yeah, no, me neither until I went down there. And then it's funny because, you start to see CompTIA and ISACA as you start to go to these cybersecurity conferences. Like I went to a cyber conference in Huntsville, Alabama. You go to
Yep.
RSA, you go to ISACA out in Vegas. And of course, they've got, tons of cyber conferences everywhere all the time. And then you start to see they've got booths out there and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's cool. Yeah,
Yeah, I see you spoke at least 8 or 9 of these conferences.
Yeah. I mean, my job is to, I'll be honest with you. I'm trying to, I have a little bit of well, not a little bit. I have a big chip on my shoulder, right? And the chip
Tell
on my
me.
shoulder is that I have this distinct feeling that people think of ANCs and tribally based organizations as body shops, not innovative, not forward thinking, not on the bleeding edge of technology, and maybe we don't have as much to contribute as some of the other organizations like IBM and the rest of them, right? So whenever I can get out there and I can illustrate that we too should have a seat at the table. We should have a seat at the table as a Native organization. We must demand our seat at the table as it relates to these sorts of things. And we want to show people that, maybe the perception of a traditional ANC may not be, what you originally thought we could be, and that we have something to contribute as it relates to emerging technology and other innovative things as well.
Oh, I'm happy that you're doing that because, like I said, I like AMCs. I could never get anyone from IBM on the phone. So I mean, I like ANCs because I feel like we can talk to them and they understand our struggles as a small business
Yeah.
and they would actually give us an opportunity. And like I said, I mean, they did it for me, so why would I not? Agree the fact that they would do it for someone else, right? I don't see myself as being special, and in that sense, I see them very often give small business a chance. So
Yeah, and a lot of that too is I also want the big companies to understand that we are here to represent small businesses. We're here to represent Native interests, and like I said, we're going to pull up our chair and we're going to take a seat at the table, and we have every right to be there and to contribute and to ask questions and to be included in the conversation as it relates to the direction of where the government's going.
mm-hmm.
So I feel really proud every time I get an opportunity to be on a panel with so many distinguished. I mean, you see some of the really distinguished people I get to speak with on panels, right. And some of the really prestigious organizations where I get an opportunity to be included. It makes me feel proud to know that I'm out there representing a Native organization.
How did you get into the blockchain? Because you went from accountant to project management professional.
Right.
I didn't see that connection to the blockchain and technology.
So,
I missed it in my research.
Blockchain is being used quite a bit with, in financial transactions, right, okay. With the KYC.
Yep.
And if you think about it, I mean, when you're an accountant, you deal with ledgers, right? You deal with debits and credits. And a blockchain is an electronic distributed ledger. So it conceptually made sense to me. And I got into blockchain because I was actually looking for ways that we could provide the best document management to our customers. So we do a lot of records management and document management, e-discovery, FOIA, et cetera. And so I like to think of us as customers go through their maturity cycle, right, as it relates to managing their information right? Because information management is a huge thing now. I mean, we've got tons and tons of data and frankly, no clue, right, on on how to manage it, right? This is a huge thing. So I thought about, how can I best support my customer as they go through their journey, right, and support them every step of the way. So they may be, drowning in paper. Okay, we've got to digitize. Okay, we've got to put it in a cloud. Okay, we've got to secure it. What's the next level? What's the emerging technology related to helping our customers manage their data? And that's frankly how I got into blockchain. Was I was on a pursuit to figure out how we could. I mean, it's up to us, right, as a government contractor to keep our customer aware of emerging technology. I mean, that's what they pay us to do, right? So, and how we can best help them. So yeah, I got to, I was invited to be part of the working group that was a COLO, right? So it was a co-government, co-industry working group. So, I got an opportunity to meet some of the really high-level government people that are really out there and kind of sticking their neck out there and really implementing this thing. I mean, it's been great. I made tons of people that I would consider to be friends, and tons of friends. Learned a ton, and most importantly, I feel like I'm better prepared to serve the mission, the government's mission.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, we talked earlier about. We mentioned one, and by the way, if you haven't noticed, I take notes. So when I look down to the side, I have a notebook here that I take notes the whole time that we're having a conversation, so I can come back to it. So I'm not ignoring you. I'm just taking notes.
No.
Before you worked at Chenega, did you know anything about ANCs?
No.
Okay. So
no, I worked at Accenture. With a consulting firm as in client financial management, and then I worked as a tax analyst at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I didn't really know what Chenega was. I mean, because remember, I came as a client financial manager or a controller over to Chenega. That was my capacity that I was coming over. So when I looked at the job description, I said, okay, I've done this before. I've worked and managed federal government contracts, the financials of that, right? So I was looking to see how I was qualified. Now, of course, when I started, when I knew I got an interview and everything at Chenega, I started to learn a little bit more. And I thought it was really cool, how we consider ourselves a corporation for a higher cause and how we're owned by the natives and the native tribe. And so I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, I learned on the job. Now, it's been a journey.
What we mentioned a lesson learned for the newly formed company, but what about the growing from the line staff person up to director of operations? And we kind of skipped that part, right? Because I'm thinking of some people, right, young people that are coming in, and maybe they're an accountant, and they're hearing your story, and they're saying, "Wow, I'd love to do that one day." Because everyone's not ready to necessarily go out and start their own business from scratch, right? Put their money, quit their jobs. I mean, this might be a path that's more suited for a lot of people out there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was really lucky. I have a great boss. He's the president of the strategic business unit. His name is John Campagna. And so he invested in me to receive executive coaching. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't even know what he was talking about when he told me to start taking executive coaching. And to be honest, I didn't understand why. But he's, a lot wiser than I am, having been in the business for 20 years. So that helped me a lot. And so they made me take some personality tests and leadership tests to understand my leadership style and my personality, and when I need to flex, and how to quote unquote smooth those edges out, and kind of, because you're right. I mean, it was a jump, because it's one thing to do the work, right, and to be really good at it, and frankly, nobody was questioning that. Nobody was questioning my technical competency, right?
No, right.
It was the leadership competency and getting people to listen to you and getting people to follow you and respect you and work with you. And you think, the boss and the leader, that little cartoon that they have with the guy, you want to be the guy in the front, the gal in the front, pulling, and you want those folks with you, pulling the big heavy rucksack. So, yeah, so that was great because I learned more like what, and they continue to give it to me. They continue to give me tests. I mean, it's a little painful sometimes hearing these things about yourself and what you need to
Like,
be better at. But he's a really forward-thinking guy, so I was really blessed, you know, to have him to say, hey, Sonia, we need to make sure that this is going to help you bridge the gap between just technical stuff and understanding how to be an executive that people will follow into the fire, you know, into the storm. So that definitely helped. So I know that not everybody's, you know, so that's something that I would say maybe if you're working at a company, you may ask your boss if that's something that they would be willing to invest in, or maybe you go half and half with them in it. And you don't have to take a ton of coaching sessions. You can just do a couple, or you do it when you can. And I mean, it shouldn't overtake anything, but it is helpful to do those leadership and personality tests just so you kind of know what you're working with. Because for me, like, have you heard of this test where they decide what kind of bird you are? Have you heard this?
I haven't heard that one on a bird.
Oh gosh. So there's different birds, and an eagle is somebody who wants it straight to them, right?
Okay.
Like bluff, like give me the bluff, give me the, you know, and an owl is somebody who's very process oriented, and a dove is somebody who's very relationship oriented, and a parrot, I'm not making this up, a parrot is somebody who is very about the show, about the imagery of everything. So they made everybody in our executive team take the test and determine what kind of bird you were, and understand that you've got to flex your style. So I'll tell you, mine was eagle, and owl, then dove, right? So I'm always the eagle, get to the point. But now I know if I'm dealing with a person who's a dove, we have to soften it a little bit. We have to talk about the relationship. But if I know I'm dealing with another eagle, you know, they don't want to spend 20 minutes talking about their weekend. They want to know, okay, let's do it. They don't have the attention span. So I've learned to try to identify what style people want me to engage them with, and then I have to flex my style to that. And that's not just with executives, that's with customers, partners, employees.
So can you recognize people's styles now when you talk to them?
Somewhat, yes. Okay. I can, because I've learned to look for it too. I have learned to understand how people want me to engage with them, and it matters because I get better results based on how I engage with them.
You know, that's interesting. I have never done that particular test, but I have noticed that I put out a lot of content, and I notice sometimes I'll do content on, let's say, a whiteboard, and then sometimes I'll draw, right, what I'm trying to convey. And what I've done recently is I ask you, I go, how would you like me to explain this to you, right? And that helps, right? Because some people say, and I say, I could do it either way. You know, do you want me to give it to you like analytically, like the technical side, or would you like me to create you an image that you could visually see?
Yeah.
And it's been really successful with me conveying my ideas and concepts to people that way. So
yeah, you've got to understand how people learn, and also for me especially, I've had to understand how people like to communicate. Some people like to they really prefer to communicate face to face. Some people prefer to communicate just via email. That's their preference.
Well, you know, it's interesting. When you said that, I was going to interject about the cell phone. I've given up my cell phone. People are afraid to call sometimes. So that's, you know, I think it goes against what people believe in terms of if you put your cell phone number out, that people are going to call you all the time. I've given my number out to people and they don't even call you.
My number, I probably shouldn't say, my number's plastered all over the internet, and I don't get any right, nobody calls. I mean, because I think you're right. I mean, there is some hesitation, and I keep myself, I have an office number, but I don't give it out because I'm usually out and about, you know, roaming around, you know, somewhere at some conference, somewhere it used to be until this whole COVID thing hit. But people don't get abusive with the cell phone, and people do hesitate. You're right to call, and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do the same thing. I don't call everyone who gives me their number all the time, right? I feel like I don't want to waste people's time. So I think it's, as a humans, we have respect and we're courteous to others.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in general, yeah. And I think people, especially if they don't know the person very well, they want to they'll just communicate via email because it's maybe not as intrusive.
Right.
A phone call can sometimes feel intrusive. And sometimes I have to tell business partners too, I'm like, it's okay for you to text me on my phone. And a lot of times they'll be like, oh, okay, because even
permission.
texting,
right?
like
texting
texting is a little personal. Sometimes for me, it's not. But I'll tell them, it's perfectly fine to text me. And they'll be like, oh, okay, so if you don't want to be quite as intrusive with a phone call, texting is good too. It's just a matter of establishing ground rules and communicating with people about how you want to be communicated with.
So, what do you see the future of Chenega over the next 5 years?
Chenega.
Well, you're Chenega. We're gonna not Chenega, the Chenega at the top, analytic business. How about that? Cabs. Let's say that for cabs.
Yeah. Well, they're kind of one and the same. So, Chenega is really making, and I don't want to say too much about the internal things that we're doing, but we are doing a lot of internal fact finding. We are making a lot of strategic investments within the company to continue to respond to the ever-changing government contracting environment, right? So things are changing. Back in the day, it was a very different market. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we're seeing these changes. We're seeing these political headwinds. You see what's going on with politics. You see category management is one thing. There's many other confluence of factors. And we have to be aware of these factors, and we have to make strategic investments in people and in tools and in processes in order to stay competitive and make sure that we're not caught blindsided. So we're constantly changing, and we're constantly, and churn isn't the right word, but we're constantly working harder to become a data-driven organization. We made a lot of internal investments to become a very, very data-driven organization, but at the same time, we don't want to lose what makes us unique, which is our people and our that we care about people and that we are a family, if that makes sense. So I definitely see with the investments that are being made and the conversations that are being had, I see us in a very good place. I see Chenega, what I call Big Chenega, in a very big place. Chenega Analytic, I hope I see us continuing to build our past performance. I see us continuing to serve the mission of our DoD and federal civilian customers. I see us getting on to best-in-class vehicles and competing in a small business and maybe potentially a full and open environment, and really being a contender. So I see very, very positive things for Chenega, and I'm really excited about to be a part of it.
When's the next time you think you'll get back to Ireland?
Ireland.
I know.
I know
things are different now, right?
Oh man, I will be happy to go anywhere at this point. Ireland was gorgeous. It's funny, we actually have an office out in Belfast. So, and I've been I know. Wow. I'm so horrible. My boss even wanted me to go out there, and I was like, no, I'm busy. I can't go, because it's hard. It's hard to travel and
run
to
a
be,
business.
and then the government customer calls you and it's Tuesday and they're like, can you come by on Thursday? And I hate to say no. So I'm a little bit.
That's what just happened to me. They said, hey, can you do a site visit Thursday?
Always.
And you're like,
always.
You told me 2 weeks ago about this project. Now I get a Monday morning call. Say, can you be Thursday at 10 a.m.?
Hurry up and wait. Hurry up and wait.
I know.
What are
And
you
then, by
gonna
the
do?
way, turn this around in 3 weeks.
Right. Oh,
I
well,
said, can I have more time? Well, we're kind of, they probably sat on it for a year. Who
what are you
knows?
gonna do?
No, no. Right. What are you going to do? Turn down the opportunity? Say, I don't want
No,
it?
you're
No,
not.
no,
You
you're
know
not.
what? Because there's 17 other people behind you in line that want it.
I want it. No, that's true. That's
That
true.
want it.
That's true.
And
That's
are
true.
hungry.
Not 100.
So you gotta stay humble and hungry, and the 3 H's: hungry, humble, hustle. Those are my 3 H's.
I think those are great, some parting words for everybody out there.
Yeah, the 3 H's. Always words of wisdom to
Hungry,
live by. Yeah,
hungry, hustle.
hungry,
Uh-huh.
humble,
Uh-huh.
hustle.
Hungry, humble, hustle. That's your 3 H's.
My 3 H's.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Listen, Sonia, this has been great conversation. I know we've been trying a couple months now to get to hook up, and I've been swamped too with this whole COVID and PPE and everything else like that. So we're actually submitting some technologies to Air Force Works on behalf of some of our GovCon family, students, team. So it's interesting to see how this all plays out when it's all over with. What I do like is that people are saying it's creating a blank canvas where a lot of us new people out here, right? We're going to have a chance to really shine.
I look at this, although it's super tough. When this whole thing hit, I'll tell you, I was nervous. I was like, how is this going to work out? This is our prime time selling season. We're a small business. We were counting on X, Y, and Z. And I was like, you know what, Sonia, it's your time. This is your opportunity to either fall down or to shine. And those that follow the 3 H's, and we've got to understand that I can't control certain things, but I can only control myself and how I react to the things that I can't control, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is an opportunity for small businesses to shine. Yeah. And I know we're all going to get through this together.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Hey, listen, thank you so much for coming on today. Great call. Actually, I'm glad I did some research, but I didn't even need the notes. I mean, we were just able and I figured as much. Whenever people go out and they do a lot of speaking engagements, it's easy to talk to.
Oh, thank you.
It's very easy to have a conversation.
Well, it was a pleasure. I'm honored that you wanted to speak with me. I'm really happy.
No, I want to come back around 5 years from now and have another conversation, and you can tell me all these wonderful things that you've done.
That's right. Yeah.
That's what I want to hear about. So looking forward to it.
Absolutely. All right. Likewise. Thank you so much.
Hey, GovCon Giants family. Thanks for staying around. One of the things that I greatly enjoyed about today's conversation with Sonia was how free-flowing it was. She did not offer up standard responses, and to me was very open with her answers. I also found it fascinating how she oftentimes gives out her number for people to call directly, which is really weird. It's a first-of-a-kind practice that I've only heard mentioned before, but not ever done. But before I let you go, if you've never heard me mention in any of my interviews, videos, or other online content, I absolutely adore the ANCs, the Alaskan Native Corporations. They were the ones that brought me back from the brink of bankruptcy and helped me out in my greatest times of need. And in my opinion, they are helping push the needle forward by working with and hiring other small business companies. As a newly formed company looking to break into the marketplace, the ANCs are very, very open to giving new companies a chance. They have the same capacity as the large mega firms out there in the world, but because they're subdivided into smaller parts, they're more accessible. And I found that as long as you perform your job, that they pay on time, which is a biggie for us companies out there. Pre-COVID-19, I was actually at a meetup in Dallas and recommended that one of the attendees that came out to see me reach out to an ANC about some projects in his hometown. He was having a hard time breaking into the government marketplace. Immediately following that event, he sent me an email and said that he reached out to one of the companies and they sent him a proposal to bid. Now, I can say this, when it comes to the big boys like Northrum and Boeing and all those guys, you don't even know who you should be talking to. So I wanted to share that story, that how they gave him a chance. And when I was down and out, they gave me a chance. And so I can't imagine that they won't do the same for you and all of my listeners out there. Hey, listen, thanks for tuning in. As always, the show notes and all pertinent information will be available on our site at govcongiants.com/podcast.